Right, ready for a deep dive. We're tackling this concept called Karma Dosham today.
Karma Dosham.
Yeah, it's a Tamil word.
Okay.
And we're going off of this text. It's just called karmadosham.txt. So pretty straightforward.
Straight to the point.
Yeah, basically, maybe you've heard this term before, maybe not.
Right.
But if you're hearing it for the first time, it can sound kind of, I don't know.
A little intimidating.
Yeah, intimidating, maybe even like...
Yeah, scary.
Yeah, like a scary thing.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to unpack a little bit today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to start off, the text explains that Karma Dosham basically comes from combining karma.
Okay.
Which means actions.
Right. Action.
And then dosham.
Dosham.
And that means like defect or a fault.
It's like a flaw in the action or something.
Yeah, so it's basically like the kind of not perfect consequences of our actions, right?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It's like a very simple way to put it. But what makes Karma Dosham so interesting is it's not just that simple good deeds, good rewards kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not that straightforward.
Exactly. It's not straightforward karma.
It suggests that what you've done in the past really can have an impact on your present life in some pretty complex ways.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, like, okay, so let's say you work really hard at your job.
Uh-huh.
And you're like totally on track for that promotion,
Yeah, you think you're going to get it.
Yeah, and then it just falls through, like completely.
Oh, yeah.
The text uses that example, actually. It talks about hitting those roadblocks.
It makes you wonder, right?
It does, right? Like you're putting in the work, the effort.
Putting in the effort, and you get nothing.
And it's like, why?
Totally been there.
Have you ever felt like you're just stuck in a rut no matter what you do?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this is where Karma Dosham gets kind of interesting, right? Because it's like, is it just bad luck?
Right, or is there something else going on?
Or is there something else? Yeah.
And I think that's what the idea of Karma Dosham is trying to explain.
Okay.
But it's not saying like, oh, you messed up in the past, so you're doomed,
Right. It's not fatalistic.
It's not fatalistic, exactly. It's more about like, hey, maybe the things you did before are kind of influencing what's happening now, and that might be why you're having such a hard time.
Okay, so it's more about understanding, like, how the past might be shaping your present.
Exactly.
And you know what I thought was really cool? The text actually uses Newton's third law to explain this.
Oh, wow.
For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Right. I remember that from physics.
It's kind of wild how they bring in, like, science to explain this ancient concept.
Yeah, it's kind of like a modern way to look at it.
It is, right. It makes it feel so relatable.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's not that simple. Of course, things are way more complicated than that, but it does make you think about...
Makes you think.
Like, if you're always negative, or if you're doing things that aren't so great, well, don't be surprised if bad things come back to you.
So it's about taking responsibility, like, for the energy we're putting out there.
I think so, yeah.
And the text actually tells this really powerful story about King Harishchandra.
King Harishchandra.
Yeah, he was like this super righteous king.
Uh-huh.
But then, because of his Karma Dosham, he loses everything, like his kingdom, his wealth, his family.
Wow, that's intense.
It is. It's pretty heavy stuff.
I can see why you called it intimidating earlier.
Yeah, it's definitely a concept that makes you think.
It does, but the story isn't just about being punished, though, right? I mean, I think the point is that King Harishchandra goes through all that, faces those challenges, and in the end, he comes out transformed.
So it's about finding redemption, even after going through difficult times.
Yeah, and understanding that, the choices we make, they have consequences, but those consequences can also lead to growth.
Yeah, it's not about just punishment or reward. It's about learning and growing from your past actions.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it did.
Now, the text also gets into how Karma Dosham might show up in our lives through, like, specific astrological signs.
Oh, okay. So we're getting a little cosmic now.
A little bit, yeah.
It mentions Saturn being in certain houses in your birth chart, or Saturn being outside the Rahu-Ketu axis.
Right.
So for someone who's not really into astrology, can you explain what those even mean?
Sure. So basically in astrology, Saturn is the planet of like lessons and limitations.
Limitations. Okay.
And yeah, karma too.
That's right.
It's all about like discipline and responsibility. So wherever Saturn is in your birth chart, that could be an area where you face delays or you have to learn things the hard way.
So it's like Saturn is pointing out where you need to put in the work.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got Rahu and Ketu.
Rahu and Ketu.
Yeah, they're the lunar nodes, and in astrology, they're like karmic points.
Karmic points? What does that even mean?
It's kind of complicated, but basically they're connected to like your soul's journey, past lives.
Past lives.
Yeah, and also your deepest desires and fears.
Okay, that's getting pretty deep.
Yeah, and so the text suggests that where Saturn is, like relative to these nodes, could show if there's a strong karmic influence happening in your life.
Okay, that makes sense, but what if someone doesn't have their birth chart, like right in front of them?
hmm
Are there any real-life experiences that could suggest Karma Dosham is at play?
Yeah, that's where it gets tricky. The text does list some things like having constant family issues, trouble with relationships, or even just like always hitting roadblocks in your career or health.
Mm-hmm.
And it says that these problems might feel like they're repeating, like a pattern that keeps coming back.
But those sound like pretty normal things that everyone goes through, don't they?
You're right, they do. So just because you're having a tough time doesn't automatically mean it's Karmadosham. It's more about noticing if there's a pattern and how it makes you feel.
Like how those experiences make you feel.
Yeah, do you feel like you're constantly fighting an uphill battle?
Like no matter how hard you try.
Exactly, like you're always hitting the same wall, but in different areas of your life. That might be something to think about.
Okay, so let's say I'm listening to all this and thinking, man, maybe this is why I can't seem to make any relationship last. Is there anything you can do about Karma Dosham? Does the text give any solutions?
It does, and that's something we can definitely talk about. But before we jump into remedies, it's important to understand that remedies aren't about just like magically erasing your past, you know?
So it's not like hitting the cosmic reset button.
Not really. The text is more about figuring out what your past actions are trying to teach you and then using that knowledge to actually make positive changes in your life now.
Okay, so instead of running from your Karma Dosham, you're like, turn around and facing it head on.
That's a good way to put it. It's about taking those experiences and using them as fuel to grow and learn.
I like that. And the text specifically mentions like cultivating qualities like love and compassion and patience. But those sound kind of, I don't know, a little vague.
Yeah, they are pretty broad concepts. I get that.
Like, how do you even do that? Especially when you're feeling all the weight of those past actions, you know?
Yeah, that's where the real work comes in. The text suggests things like practicing meditation and mindfulness, or even just doing acts of service for others. It's like a way to strengthen those qualities within yourself.
So you're basically choosing to act with kindness and patience, even when it's tough.
That's the idea. Even if someone does something to hurt you, you choose to react with love instead of anger. Or if you're stuck in a frustrating situation, you practice patience instead of getting all worked up.
So it's about shifting your inner state to align with those positive energies.
Exactly.
Okay, but hold on. Even if you believe in all this Karma Dosham stuff, it's not an excuse to just blame everything on your past lives, right?
No, definitely not. It's about taking responsibility for what you're doing now while still acknowledging that the past can have an influence.
So it's kind of a balancing act.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like what the text says, the past doesn't have to be a burden, but a teacher.
I really like that. It's a good reminder that we can learn and grow from anything, even our mistakes.
Exactly. And that's something the text really emphasizes. Karmadosham isn't supposed to be scary. It's more about awareness and understanding.
So it's not about being afraid of some kind of cosmic punishment.
Nope, not at all. It's about seeing how everything is connected, how our actions and experiences are all woven together.
And understanding that we have the power to change things based on the choices we make.
Right.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
Yeah.
So for someone who's just hearing about Karma Dosham for the first time, what can they do to apply these ideas to their own life? Like, what kind of guidance does the text offer?
Well, it encourages you to really be mindful of your choices, to
Mhm.
think about how they'll affect not just you, but everyone around you. Remember King Arachandra from earlier?
Yeah, the king who lost everything.
Right. One way to think about Karmadosham is to look at the areas where he suffered. He lost his kingdom, his wealth, his family.
Okay.
Those could represent different parts of life where our past actions might come back around.
So if someone's always struggling with money, maybe they should think about how they've handled finances in the past.
Yeah, like have they been honest? Responsible? Or if someone's always having problems in their relationships, maybe they should think about how they've treated their partners in the past.
Were they disloyal? Did they take their partner for granted?
Right. It's not about dwelling on the past or beating yourself up about it.
But it's about learning from those experiences.
Exactly. It's about using those reflections as a way to grow and make better choices in the future.
So Karma Dosham is basically inviting us to take a closer look at those patterns in our lives and ask ourselves, what's contributing to this?
Exactly. And then use those insights to start making different choices.
It's about taking control.
That's a good way to put it. Because Karmadosham isn't a life sentence.
It's not set in stone.
Not at all. It's a process, something that's always changing.
So it's about understanding that we have the power to change things, even if it's just through small choices and actions every day.
Exactly. And, even if you don't buy into the whole past lives and karma thing,
Yeah.
the core message is still valuable. It's about understanding that our actions have consequences and encouraging us to be more mindful.
To think before we act.
Right. And that's something that can benefit everyone.
This has been really interesting. I never thought exploring something like Karmadosham could be so insightful.
It's amazing how these ancient concepts can still be so relevant today.
It really makes you think about the kind of legacy we're creating, doesn't it? Not just the physical things we leave behind, but the energy we put out into the world.
It does, and that's a powerful thought.
It is. So if we were to sum all this up for our listeners, what would be the main takeaway?
I think it goes back to that line from the text. The past doesn't have to be a burden, but a teacher. Understanding Karmadosham can help you see the patterns in your life and give you the power to create a better future.
It's like those challenges, those patterns, they might be there to help us grow and transform,
Yeah, like little nudges from the universe telling us to change course.
to align with our true potential.
That's a good way to put it. It's not about feeling guilty about the past. It's about learning from it and moving forward.
So Karmadosham isn't a punishment. It's a chance to become better.
Exactly. You have the power to shape your own destiny.
Wow. This deep dive has been a real journey.
It has. It's amazing how much one text can make you think.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. If you believe in Karmadosham, what can you do today to create a better future for yourself?
What small changes can you make?
What can you do to shift those patterns, to cultivate those positive qualities we were talking about, to really align with your best self?
That's a great question, and one that we all have to answer for ourselves.
It's all about taking action. And with that, we want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Karmadosham.
I hope it's given you some things to think about.
And maybe even inspired you to start your own journey of self-discovery and growth.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, it's like we're not just, along for the ride.
Right.
We're actually the ones creating the map.
Yeah, we have a say in where we end up.
I like that. So if we had to pick one thing for our listeners to take away from all this, what would it be?
I think it all comes back to that line from the text. The past doesn't have to be a burden, but a teacher.
Powerful stuff.
It is, right. And I think if you can really understand Karmadosham, you can learn a lot about yourself.
About those patterns in your life.
Yeah, and hopefully start making choices that lead to a brighter future.
So it's like those challenges, those roadblocks we hit, maybe they're actually opportunities in disguise.
That's one way to look at it.
Like little wake-up calls from the universe.
Yeah, like, hey, pay attention. Maybe try something different.
To help us get back on track and reach our full potential.
Exactly.
It's not about beating ourselves up over past mistakes.
No, it's about taking responsibility, learning from them, and moving on.
So Karmadosham isn't some kind of punishment. It's more like a chance to evolve.
Yeah, to become the best version of yourself.
This deep dive has been amazing. I'm always surprised by how much we can learn from just one text.
Me too. It's like these ancient concepts. They never really get old, do they?
They're still relevant today.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, I have one last question for our listeners. If you believe in this whole Karmadosham thing, what can you do right now, today, to make your future better?
What steps can you take?
To break those negative patterns, cultivate those positive qualities we were talking about, and really, truly become your best self.
That's a powerful question.
It is. And ultimately, it's up to each of us to find the answers.
Absolutely.
And on that note, we want to thank you for joining us on this exploration of Karmadosham.
We hope you enjoyed it.
And maybe learn a thing or two along the way. Thanks for tuning in.